Happy Dragon Week, everybody. In honor of this illustrious day, I have put together a super dragony, gishy, multi-target cleaver build that is going to be lighting multiple enemies on fire, hitting hard with big attacks, and striking fear into enemies everywhere, just like any good dragon would do. Welcome to D4. Right, so here at D4, each week I take a deep dive into specific character builds for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them, I like to theorycraft about them, not that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a character, but to explore one potential way to build something in the hopes of creating a character that's both really fun, but also really powerful to play. So if you also enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, or if you just really like Trogdor, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I am so glad you're here. So thanks for watching. My name is Colby. Yeah, so in case you missed it last year, yes, my friends Ginny D and Antonio from Pointy Hat started an annual tradition, Monster Week, where they pick a monster for that year, and then pretty much any TTRPG content creator who wants to can make a video about that monster. Think Shark Week, but way cooler. Last year we did Krakens. Find my Kraken build for it right here if you haven't seen it. That build seriously cooked. I guess kind of chilled, more accurately, maybe. The cooking is actually happening this year because, yes, the monster this year is my favorite monster of all time, dragons. Huzzah. And yes, if you're interested in checking out all of the other videos from participants in Monster Week, I've got a link in the video description that will take you to a directory which will be updated throughout the week as more people release content. So please be sure to check out the stuff that other content creators are doing. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, when I first found out that we were doing dragons, my first thought was just to try and combine every single dragon-focused player option that I could find in the game and stuff it into one character and see if we could make it work. Draconic Sorcerer, of course, but maybe also the Ascendant Dragon Monk and the Drake Warden Ranger, or maybe the Purple Dragon Knight Fighter that's in Unearthed Arcana right now, etc., etc. But the more I thought about it, the less interested I became in trying to do that. It would be fun, I know, but in the end, those subclasses just don't synergize all that well together. Everyone wants their bonus action. It would be too mad, multiple ability score dependent, and it was just a little high on the concept scale, low on the mechanics, if you know what I mean. And I like to do builds that are high on both. So today we're going to be doing Draconic Sorcerer, yes, with a healthy heaping of some other classes too, because I think that by combining the Draconic Sorcerer with the right feats, spells, features, even species, and multi-class dips, we can make one heck of a spell sword, multi-target damage dealing gishy cleaver, and it feels super dragony, but can hit like a truck and light everything on fire, and it's just freaking awesome. So let's jump into it, shall we? I proudly present D&D episode number 211, Enter the Dragon, the Dragon Warrior. Those both would need to be a monk, like an Ascendant Dragon Monk probably, preferably with a homebrew panda species. The Dragon Axe, Sork Chop, that's good. Slash and Burn, Hack and Ash, Axes to Ashes. Those and many more fantastic suggestions came from the Discord server, as always. Thanks, you guys. But I think this week, let's just go with the Draconic Cleaver. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for the build this week. If you'd be interested in following Randall to see the other stuff that he's done, or to maybe even try and commission him to create some art for your character or even your entire party, I'll put links in the video description, as always, on how to do so. But first, real quick, I have a question for you guys. Are you interested in potentially exploring other tabletop role-playing games outside of D&D, and or are you interested, like me, in anything and everything about World War II? Judging by the demographic data that YouTube gives me on my viewers, I think there's a really high likelihood that both of those things are true for a big chunk of you. But if even just one of them is, then you are going to want to check out the sponsor for today's video, War Stories by Firelock Games. For those who are unfamiliar with it, War Stories is a highly acclaimed World War II role-playing game. It already exists. The game's been out for a while. In it, Players take on the roles of brave soldiers or civilians facing the trials of global conflict. Right now, at the time of this video release, War Stories has a Kickstarter campaign that has already well exceeded its funding goal that expands the game with 2 major new books. War Stories The Pacific will add rich context and a 6-mission Guadalcanal campaign, while Operation Market Garden is going to highlight the heroic actions of the US Airborne post-Normandy, right? I should mention that they already have one campaign book out. It's called Rendezvous with Destiny, that focuses on Project Overlord, aka D-Day, right? And specifically the role of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st US Airborne Division during Project Overlord. And if that rings a bell for you, it's probably because the 506th is what Easy Company was part of in Band of Brothers, right? So we're kind of following sort of that same group. Man, that show is good. It might be time for a rewatch. Anyways, beyond 2 awesome looking campaign books, this Kickstarter also introduces a deck of new weapon cards, a stunning new GM screen, and, for the first time, unique miniatures crafted by Firelock's sculpting team that look fantastic. Importantly, backing the Kickstarter can also get you the original core rulebook for the game and even previous supplements like Rendezvous with Destiny that I mentioned if you're new to the game, right? So whether you're a veteran, no pun intended, of War Stories or checking it out for the first time, now is the perfect time to jump into what many consider the definitive World War II RPG. At the very least, please go check out the Kickstarter to learn more about the game and see all the awesome stuff that you could get by backing it. When you do, I would appreciate it if you would use the link that I'm putting in the video description and the pinned comment as always so that they know I sent you. And yeah, let's support our awesome independent RPG creators. So big thanks to Firelock for your support. Congrats on crushing that funding goal. I can't wait to see the finished product here. Okay, let's get back to the build. At level 1. For our starting class, we for sure want to start Sorcerer, not just because it's where we're going to get a lot of our Dragony features, but because starting Sorcerer gets us Constitution saving throw proficiency, which is wonderful for holding on to concentration, among other things. For our species, of course, we're going Dragonborn. What else could we do for Dragon Week? Dragonborn are amazing. We first need to pick an ancestry that will indicate what damage type we will be resistant to, as well as the damage type that our breath weapon will have. I'm going to say pick your favorite here, but with the exception that I would not pick one associated with fire. So bronze, gold, or red are out for me. So if you want to go green because you like the idea of poison resistance, or silver because they are just the best dragons and you can't convince me otherwise, or black because look at how freaking awesome this black dragon poster is, then go for it. But yes, as a Dragonborn, we're told that when we take the attack action on our turn specifically, that we can replace one of our attacks with a breath attack that can either be a 15-foot cone or a 30-foot long, 5-foot wide line. I love that we get to choose every time we use this now. That will do a d10 of damage to everyone hit by it, half on a successful dexterity save. The DC of that save is based on our Constitution modifier. It's too bad we can't choose the ability score, but Constitution isn't bad, and yes, the damage scales by a d10 at levels 5, 11, and 17. It's nice. This is the first thing that we get that does damage to multiple enemies, though I should warn you, we're not necessarily going to be using it every round. More on that later, but regardless, it will be really nice to have when you need or want it, and it's super dragony. For our background, I'm going to say, take an old one or custom one at your table if you can or want to, but if you can't, Wayfarer will actually work just fine for us since it gives us the ability score increases we want and the origin feat that I think I would most want with this build, which is, yes, Lucky. Lucky simply gives us a number of luck points equal to our proficiency bonus per day that we can use to give ourselves advantage on a d20 test of our own or disadvantage to an enemy on an attack roll of theirs. Always handy. For our starting ability scores, I assume we go point by as always and say let's take a 15 charisma and take a +2 there from our background, a 14 constitution, a 14 dexterity, and then a 12 wisdom +1 because we are going to need a 13 for multiclassing. For our starting equipment, we're actually not going to need much for the first couple of levels, so feel free to just grab the basic necessities, maybe some scale mail armor to throw on later if you want, but then, yeah, I don't know, just give the rest of your money to your friends or invest in the Waterdeep stock market. As a Sorcerer 1, we get innate sorcery, and I love this new feature, though with the build today, we're not necessarily going to get a ton of use out of it. It says that twice per day, as a bonus action, we can buff ourselves so that our sorcerer spell DC increases by 1, and so that we have advantage on all the attack rolls of our sorcerer spells. We'll talk about why we won't really be using this that much on this build a little bit later. But then we do get sorcerer spells here, of course, and I would go for, Sorceress Burst, which is a fun cantrip that can potentially do more damage if we get lucky. Lightning Lure, I think, would be a good one here, since it will let you do a little damage to an enemy and then pull them 10 feet closer to you, which will be handy if we're trying to cleave into our targets or line them up just right for an area of effect, damage ability or spell, right? Which, as I've said, is what we're building for with this character. Beyond that, a Burning Hands can be a nice first level area of effect spell. Ice Knife can do ranged damage to multiple enemies if they're standing next to each other. We'll probably want Mage Armor for just the first couple of levels to help our armor class, I think. And as always, the Shield and Absorb Elements spells are great to use our reaction and bolster our defense, right? And yeah, I probably would be more focused on defense at this point in the game, right? Level 1 can be the deadliest of them all. You know who else is deadly? My channel members and patrons. Huge shout out and thank you to all of you who support the channel like this. I'm so grateful. I could not do this without you guys. If you are not a member or a patron, I would appreciate it if you would consider joining. There's a button down below that says join. You can click on that or follow the link in my video description to my Patreon. And it will tell you about all of the potential goodies that you can get by supporting the channel in this way, including access to the library of write-ups that I create for all of my builds to help you recreate them yourself more easily, access to the community Discord server, and access to the live monthly Q&A hangout sessions that we do. I give all membership perks to anyone who signs up at the silver level or higher, and just ask that you pay what you think it's worth and what you feel like you can afford. And if you can't or don't want to do that, that's fine. I'm just glad you're here watching, liking, subscribing. All of those things are also great ways to support the channel, so thanks. All right, at level 2, we are going to do a little Warlock dip. Yeah, we're a Sorlock. We've got a lot of reasons to want Warlock levels, but the greatest at this point in our career at least is for the Eldritch Invocation we get right at level 1 now, because that is going to let us grab Pact of the Blade, and that means we can just straight up summon any melee weapon of our choice that we automatically become proficient with, or if we find a magic weapon, we can just bond with it for the same effects, right? And thereafter, we can use our charisma for our plus to hit and damage, and the weapon can deal necrotic, psychic, or radiant damage instead of its normal type, and that is really great, especially since we are going to be summoning a freaking Great Axe, which means we are a Great Axe wielding Dragonborn Sorlock, and that is just about as metal as it gets in D&D. Right next to the 2-axe wielding Barbarian, I suppose, like this up there. Okay, more on the Great Axe later. As for the Warlock spells that we get as a Warlock 1, sure, grab the usual suspects like Eldritch Blast and Armor of Agathis, both unique to Warlocks. I'd also probably want Cause Fear here, since Dragon Fear is a thing, and it's a nice single target control spell available to Warlocks. But the most important spell for this build is Green Flame Blade. This spell is exactly what we need and want on this Cleaver build, because it tells us that when we cast the spell, we make a weapon attack and then deal extra fire damage to our target once we hit level 5 at least, and extra damage to another enemy standing within 5 feet of our target. Maybe grab Booming Blade or True Strike as well here in case your target isn't standing next to another enemy, but yes, this is a cleave build meant to do damage to multiple enemies every turn, so I'm just going to assume when I crunch numbers that we've got multiple enemies that we can be hitting with our attacks and spells and other abilities. Cool. Hang on a minute, you might be saying. Sorcerers can get Green Flame Blade too. Why didn't you take this as a sorcerer? That way you can enjoy advantage on your Green Flame Blade attacks thanks to innate sorcery, right? You're right. We could have done that. Just hold your horses. We'll get there. but not before we take yet another multi-class dip at level 3. That's right, we need a level in Ranger. Hang on a minute. What the crap is the justification for this character being a Sorcerer, Warlock, Ranger at level 3? That, of course, is up to you, but if I were playing this character in game, I think I'd probably just talk it over with my DM and say, look, I want this character to be thought of as like a custom class. Call them the Dragon Warrior class or something. And they just so happen to take levels in a few different official classes to get there. Maybe better yet, I might create a backstory for this character that weaves their Draconic heritage, that's where they got their innate sorcery magic, right? With a quest given them by an ancient dragon, or maybe even a draconic deity like Bahamut or something, hence the warlock patron, to go on a quest to hunt enemies of dragon kind, hence the ranger levels. And maybe you're a giant hunter or an illithid hunter, right? Get creative and you can come up with cool ideas for any multi-class build. Anyways, as a Ranger 1, first up, we get martial weapon and medium armor proficiency. So yeah, don that scale mail, or if you can afford it now, some half plate, right, to bump your AC over mage armor now, much appreciated. But then we also get weapon mastery at Ranger 1, and it's actually the main reason why I wanted to get a Ranger level so early, because that means we can get mastery in the Great Axe, which has the cleave property, which says that once per turn, if we hit a creature with an attack roll using this weapon, note, importantly, it doesn't say as part of the attack action or anything, just that it's an attack roll, meaning that Green Flame Blade should trigger this. Then we can make another attack against a second creature within 5 feet that's within our reach. Now, on a hit, the second creature doesn't take our ability modifier in damage, but hey, that's still an extra d12 of damage to a second enemy as long as we hit their friend first. And that's awesome. One more damage to a second enemy ability in our Cleaving Tool Belt. Sweet. Rangers also get the favored enemy feature here, which gives us the Hunter's Mark spell prepared for free and lets us cast it twice per day without spending a spell slot. Nice if you need it, but I'm not planning on using Hunter's Mark for this build. Speaking of spells though, yes, we now get first level Ranger spells as well, and I'd say grab Cure Wounds and or Goodberry for some nice healing and or utility options. Entangle isn't a bad area of effect control option. Jump is a nice way to increase our jump distance and just overall move speed, so yeah, focus on support and utility here, I think. Rangers get a lot of it. But at level 4, okay, yeah, we need to get back to Sorcerer. At Sorcerer 2, then, we get Font of Magic, or our sorcery points, of which we receive 1 per Sorcerer level that we can use to exchange for spell slots or vice versa, but also now for Meta Magic, of which we get to choose 2. And as pretty much always, I'm going to say, first let's be sure and grab Quicken Spell, right? This will let us cast a spell that normally takes an action as a bonus action, meaning that we could now, yes, cast Green Flame Blade as a bonus action if we've got the sorcery points for it, and then cast it again as an action if we wanted, or sure, use our Dragonborn Breath Weapon instead. We'll talk more about that during our damage report. As for the other meta magic option to pick here, I'd say go either for Extend Spell, which would not only let us double the duration of a spell, but also, if it requires concentration, give us advantage on saves to maintain concentration. Or instead, maybe grab Transmuted Spell. This says that if we cast a spell that does elemental damage, fire, cold, lightning, poison, thunder, or acid, right, we can spend a sorcery point to change the damage type to another of those damage types. Considering how much fire damage we are going to be doing with spells, including Green Flame Blade, right, this would be important to have if we were to run into fire-resistant or immune enemies. I think I'd probably, for that reason, lean towards Transmute Spell personally. I might feel differently if we didn't have Constitution saving throw proficiency, but, you know, that's only giving us a +2 to our concentration checks. Might not be enough right now, so sure, feel free to go Extend Spell. Don't forget, thanks to multiclassing, we do now have second level spell slots. At level 5, we would be a Sorcerer 3, and that means we get our Sorcerer subclass, and of course, we are going with Draconic Sorcerer. I know, I use this subclass a lot. They are my favorite Sorcerer subclass. I promised to take a Draconic break after this for a while, but I can't ignore them during Dragon Week. So, Draconic Sorcerers get some really great features. Draconic Resilience gives us 1 more hit point per Sorcerer level. That's nice, especially for those of us that are going to be wading into melee, right? And gives us unarmored defense basically, but giving us an AC of 10 plus our dexterity plus our charisma if we're unarmored, and that's awesome, but it's not as good as like half plate plus our dexterity mod would be right now, especially if we have magic armor. So go ahead and keep your clothes on. We then get second level sorcerer spells here at this level. So many classes spells to juggle here. And draconic sorcerers get a slew for free. Alter Self, Chromatic Orb, Command, and above all, Dragon's Breath. This is the spell that I think I'm going to be concentrating on throughout the build. Not just because it has dragon in the name, though that's a big part of it, if I'm being honest, nor just because it does damage to multiple targets, though that is part of it too. We cast Dragon's Breath with a bonus action and then touch a creature, including ourselves potentially, and thereafter that creature can use their action to breathe out acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison in a 15-foot cone, and anyone who doesn't make their dexterity save against it takes 3d6 damage or half on a save. It scales by a d6 for every level we upcast it, and it is perfect for this build. Don't forget, now that we are character level 5, right, as a Dragonborn, we get Draconic Flight, which says that once per day, as a bonus action, we can sprout Draconic Wings for 10 minutes that give us a fly speed equal to our speed. Now we're really dragony. Also, don't forget that our Dragonborn Breath Weapon gets a d10 per target bump, right, so it's 2d10 now. And Green Flame Blade now does an extra d8, both to our initial target and to the enemy that's standing next to them, and that is awesome. But everything kind of really comes together for this build at level 6, because as much as I'd love to have a feat here and keep going with Sorcerer, right, we're taking another Warlock level, making us a Warlock 2. As such, we'd get the new Magical Cunning feature, which lets us regain half of our Warlock spell slots after 1 minute, once per day, right? And remember, those can be exchanged for sorcery points still, which we'll probably want, so that's really nice. And then, above all, at Warlock 2, we get 2 more Eldritch Invocations, and they are big for us. First off, we want to take Pact of the Chain. Remember, the Pacts are invocations now, and that means we can take multiple if we want, and we definitely do. Pact of the Chain lets us cast the Find Familiar spell, but of course, we get special additional options for our familiar, the most important of which, for us, is the Pseudo-Dragon. Yes! A Dragonborn with a pet mini-dragon. Perfect. Now, why is a familiar so important to us? Not because we want it to take the help action to give us advantage, no. Remember, the familiar can't make attacks on their turn, typically, though as a warlock with Pact of the Chain, we could have them make an attack. We just have to forego an attack of our own. We're not going to do that because they can take actions as normal otherwise, just not the attack action, right? That's why we so often have them take the help action. This means that now we can cast Dragon's Breath on our little baby dragon, have it fly into the air, it has a fly speed of 60 feet, and rain down fire from above, or lightning, or cold, etc. if we want. They obey our commands, no action needed by us, and have their own initiative, so they go technically on a different turn, right? The best part about this, of course, is that it keeps our action free to do with as we please. The worst part about this is our baby dragon is pretty squishy, and if they're raining down fire on our enemies every turn, they're probably a lot more likely to get targeted by enemies, yeah? Fortunately, they can fly and only need to get within 15 feet to do damage with Dragon's Breath, so I'm hopeful that they'll be able to stay relatively safe. And, I mean, if they are absorbing enemy attacks, it's still probably a net gain for our party, so I'm not too worried about it. As for the other invocation, we want Agonizing Blast. This invocation has been buffed in that it works with any Warlock cantrip we choose now, not just Eldritch Blast, right? To add our Charisma modifier and damage to that spell's damage rolls. So we will be taking this for Green Flame Blade, of course, and this is why it was so important for us to take Green Flame Blade as a Warlock cantrip. Because now, when we hit an enemy with it, and make that d8 damage roll against our target, we can add our Charisma modifier, which we were already adding once, right? Thanks to the fact that we're making a weapon attack that adds our Charisma modifier as a result of Pact of the Blade. So now we're adding it twice. And also, when the other enemy who's standing 5 feet away, theoretically, right, takes damage from Green Flame Blade, because we're making a damage roll there too, we should be able to add our Charisma modifier to that one as well. Once, because the spell automatically does that, right? And A second time because the invocation says that we get to add our charisma modifier to that spell's damage rolls. We're making 2 damage rolls here. I don't know why we wouldn't add it each time. If what makes Agonizing Blast so good with Eldritch Blast is that you get to add the charisma modifier multiple times because you're firing multiple beams, I don't know why Green Flame Blade wouldn't work the same. Feel free to argue about this in the comments if you want, but that's how I believe it should work, rules as written, so that's how I'm going to calculate it in the damage reports. And guess what? That first damage report happens right now. So let's talk about what combat would ideally look like for us right now and why. On round 1, with our bonus action, we would cast Dragon's Breath on our familiar so that on their turn they can fly over our enemies and rain fire down on as many targets as possible. I'm just going to assume that they're hitting 2 for our purposes today, since any attacks that we would be making would only be against 2 targets, and it's just a lot easier to crunch numbers that way. But keep in mind that if your familiar is 15 feet above the battlefield, throwing down a 15-foot cone of a breath attack, right? It's going to cover a 3x3 grid on the map, yeah? The cone isn't a flat line, it's a 3-dimensional cone, so there's a decent chance that you could get more than 2 enemies in the area. But we'll say 2. With our own action then on round 1, we could either use our own breath weapon or cast Green Flame Blade, but if we've got 2 enemies standing next to each other, which I'll assume, then Green Flame Blade is going to be the bigger bang for the buck. Not only will it just do more flat damage, especially thanks to Agonizing Blast, but casting it and making a weapon attack will trigger our Cleave Weapon Mastery, since again, the only thing that's required for Cleave to trigger is that we hit a creature with a melee attack roll with the weapon. We don't have to be taking the attack action. If you can get 3 or more enemies in the area of effect with your breath weapon though, or maybe if you've got 2 enemies but they're not standing right next to each other, right, then go ahead and breathe, acid or cold or lightning or whatever it is that you're doing. But assuming that we've got 2 next to each other, we would attack our primary target with Green Flame Blade, doing a d12 of damage plus 3 for our charisma modifier, plus a d8 for the spell, plus 3 more for Agonizing Blast, then another d8 plus 3 to the enemy standing next to them, plus 3 more from Agonizing Blast. If we hit, we'd then make a regular weapon attack against that second enemy for another d12 of damage, thanks to Cleave. On subsequent rounds, we would quicken Green Flame Blade with our bonus action. We only have 3 sorcery points at the moment, so we'd have to cannibalize a couple of spell slots if we wanted to do this 3 times over a 4-round combat encounter, right? Which is what I assume we've got when I do these number crunching exercises. And then use our action to cast Green Flame Blade again. Cleave attacking our second target the first time we hit with either of those. I will assume we are spending a luck point on subsequent rounds right after round 1. We have 3 of them currently to give us advantage on at least 1 attack per turn. Finally, don't forget that our baby dragon on their turn will be using Dragon's Breath every round, assuming they can stay alive. And again, with a 60-foot fly speed, I'm hopeful they can. Maybe if possible, have them hide like in your backpack or something when they're done raining down death from above. They are tiny, after all. Altogether then, when everything goes according to plan, we'd be doing 3d12 plus 4d8 plus 6d6 plus 24 damage total, spread out between 2 targets every round after the first, and that's a lot of damage. I will assume, for the record, that enemies are making their save against Dragon's Breath 50% of the time, though in all likelihood it will be lower than that. But anyways, averaged over a 4-round combat encounter against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 66 damage per round, and against a 15 armor class, it would be 55 DPR. And that is a lot of damage to be doing every round at level 6. But keep in mind, this is spread between 2 targets pretty evenly, so it's more like 30 damage or so each, right? Which is still solid, but less impressive. And of course, you'll often not have 2 enemies just standing right next to each other for you like good little bad guys, right? Then again, you've still got your Dragonborn breath weapon if they are not, and hey, there's a decent chance of hitting more than 2 with that and or with Dragon's Breath. And assuming the enemies have a 50% chance to succeed on their save might be overly generous, so I feel pretty good about the assumptions here. Now, speaking of our breath weapon attack, something interesting to note. There actually comes a point at which we are better off using our breath weapon for our action than we are using it for another Green Flame Blade attack. Once the enemy AC gets high enough, and at this point it's actually only an AC of 16 or higher, assuming the enemy has a 50% chance to succeed against it anyways. Thank goodness it still does half on a save, right? So yeah, keep that open as an option, and I have marked in yellow, like on the spreadsheet, the point at which that you'll want to switch for your action to your Dragonborn breath attack. And for those who don't know, in the video description every week I will link to spreadsheets that I put together for these builds and kind of comparing them to each other, right? Now, compared to other multi-target damage dealers that I've built for 2024 rules thus far, I mean, I've only done 2, right? So it's not a huge sample size, but this build is beating out the other Cleaver build, that mostly World Tree Barbarian that I just called the Cleaver. It's up there. And they're even beating out the other one in total damage, the Spirit Guardian spamming Cleric of Chaos, right up there. Until a very high enemy AC, at least. And that build, that Cleric build, was doing damage to 3 enemies every round. I mean, 30 DPR, even to a single target, is almost keeping up with the all-day baseline build for single target damage from a few months back, right? So yeah, I'm feeling pretty dang good about our Dragony selves. Let's see how much better we can make the build from here, yeah? At level 7, let's get back to Sorcerer because, man, we need that feat at Sorcerer 4. We still have a 17 Charisma. That's gross. I think the feat that I would take here would be Elemental Adept, probably. Warcaster is nice. You might prefer that, though I'm a little less worried about concentration with our Constitution saving throw proficiency. It is absolutely worth considering still. And sure, you know, also Dragon Fear is fun, letting us replace our breath weapon as a Dragonborn with a multi-target roar to frighten enemies. So go for that if you really want. But Elemental Adept lets us ignore fire resistance on our spells, or, you know, another elemental damage type, but I'm going to say fire since Green Flame Blade does fire damage. And while we do potentially have a way around that if we took Transmute Spell, and thanks to the fact that Dragon's Breath doesn't have to be fire, right? I'd rather not be surprised by resistance and or have to spend sorcery points for that if I don't have to. And, you know, maybe for that reason, sure, plan on taking Extend Spell instead as your meta magic option. But now that Elemental Adept is a half feat, letting us bump our Charisma to 18, it feels like the way to go for me. Plus, I guess when we roll damage for fire spells with Elemental Adept, if we roll a 1, we can count it as a 2. That's so bad. But hey, it's better than nothing, if just barely. Don't forget, thanks to multiclassing, we get 3rd level spell slots now too. Level 8, we're not staying Sorcerer. Of course, you should if you want to prioritize higher level spells and more sorcery points, and that wouldn't be a bad idea. But we're a Cleaver, dang it. And there's some low-hanging Cleaver fruit available for us that I just can't leave on the cleaving tree. But if we took a couple more Ranger levels, it could be awesome. At Ranger 2, we get Deft Explorer, which gives us expertise in a single skill that we are proficient in. Go ahead and pick your favorite there. I'd probably favor Perception, personally. But then we also get a Fighting Style, which, I mean, sure, if we were really going for damage overall, I guess we'd take Great Weapon Fighting here, but don't. Just don't. It's so bad. Maybe if we had a great sword or a maul, but it's worse on a great axe, right? It just says that when we roll our great axe damage, the d12, right, then 1s and 2s count as 3s. It seriously only raises our average DPR by like a quarter of a point. I think I'd either take defense for an armor class bump, we are trying to be in melee after all, and don't have a shield, or blind fighting in case we get put into magical darkness or a fog cloud or are fighting an invisible enemy, etc. Really handy when you need it. But at level 9, we would be a Ranger 3, and that means we get our Ranger subclass, and that means we can be, no, not a Drake Warden. I appreciate that it would be cool thematically, but we need our bonus action, and we don't want to be giving it up for a pet Drake to make attacks, right? Besides, we already have a little pet dragon, and he's way cuter, and he gets super jealous. No, we would take the Hunter subclass, like the giant hunters that we are, maybe, for improved cleaving. So Hunters are awesome. In case you didn't know, at this level, they get Hunter's Lore, which says that if a target is marked by our Hunter's Mark spell, we automatically know their immunities, resistances, or vulnerabilities, if they have any. And honestly, this is pretty awesome. It just stinks that we aren't planning on using Hunter's Mark. If we can stealth approach a group of enemies and like cast this without revealing ourselves, maybe it'd be worth using just to scout out the baddies and see what we're up against. Maybe we want Subtle Spell in that case. Good meta magic. And yeah, I mean, maybe this could help us decide if we need to be transmuting spells or changing what kind of damage Dragon's Breath is going to be doing, or what kind of damage we should have our Pact Weapon do as well, right? It'd be really nice. But the main reason that we came Hunter is, of course, for the Hunter's Prey feature, because it lets us choose after a short or long rest If we want to be Colossus Slayers, doing an extra d8 of damage to an injured enemy once per turn, or better yet for us, of course, a Horde Breaker, which says, similar to the Cleave Weapon Mastery, that once per turn, when we make an attack with a weapon, and we're doing that when we cast Green Flame Blade, right, we can make another attack with the same weapon against a different creature within 5 feet of the target that we haven't attacked yet this turn. But unlike Cleave, this is just a regular attack. We get to add our ability score modifier to it and everything, and that is nice. So let's discuss in our level 9 damage report. Since last check, we've bumped our charisma to 18, our spell slots to 3rd level, got a teeny bump from Elemental Adept, and picked up 1 more attack per round thanks to Horde Breaker, potentially. At this point, we would want to be sure that after landing our attack with Green Flame Blade, we first use Horde Breaker to attack the second target, then cleave back onto our first target. And you know what? This means that on rounds 2 through 4 anyways, we will be making 4 attacks every round, potentially, with our Great Axe. And we don't even have freaking extra attack. Bonus action Green Flame Blade, action Green Flame Blade, Horde Breaker attack, cleave attack. That's kind of amazing. We also can potentially use a luck point every round now, thanks to the proficiency bonus bump that we get, right? And so, with Dragon's Breath upcast to 4d6 per target per round, if we wanted to do that, averaged over a 4-round combat encounter against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 94 damage per round. And against a 16 AC, it would be 77 DPR. That is a very nice, like 50% increase over last check, give or take. But again, that is assuming we have 2 targets standing next to each other. But again, that's assuming we can only get 2 targets in the 3x3 area of our Dragon's Breath. Also, FYI, thanks to our better hit chance and to the fact that Green Flame Blade is hitting harder now with a better charisma score, and because if we land Green Flame Blade, it can trigger both a Horde Breaker attack and a cleave attack, we wouldn't want to use our action for our Dragonborn Breath weapon clear up until an enemy AC of 20 or higher. It still will be nice to have though in those situations, or again, if the enemies aren't right next to each other, or if we can get 3 or more in the AoE, right? Anyways, compared to other multi-target damage dealers to date, at this level, we are soundly beating that other Cleaver build now, but have fallen a little behind the Cleric of Chaos. It's just so easy to hit multiple enemies multiple times per round with Spirit Guardians now, due to the spell rewording, that we're gonna have a hard time keeping up with that build on, this character, but hey, we are still doing more damage per enemy than that build was, and more importantly, that build wasn't even a little bit Dragony. We are so much cooler than they are. That's all that really matters. Okay, at level 10, you might be thinking that the best thing for us to do at this point would be to try and get extra attack, yeah? Actually, not really. At least, not yet. I mean, sure, if you really want to, go for it, but thanks to how much mileage that we are getting out of Green Flame Blade, we're pretty happy to just keep using our action primarily for that. Instead, I think the best thing that we can do for damage is to scale up our spell slots for a more powerful Dragon's Breath and pick up a nice Draconic Sorcerer feature while we're at it. And yeah, getting more sorcery points, better sorcerer spells, right? Those are all super great. So let's get back to sorcerer for a while, meaning that we would be a sorcerer 5 here. And that gives us sorceress restoration, which lets us restore half of our sorcery points once per day after a short rest, much appreciated. And then we get 3rd level sorcerer spells here too. And I mean, let's be honest, you might be crazy for delaying these until this point in the build, right? Obviously, if your primary goal with this character was not to just do as much cleave damage as possible to 2 or more enemies every round, but was instead to be just a potent spellcaster who could also do some cleavy things once in a while, then sure, get to Sorcerer 5 quicker. For us, though, now we are really thrilled to get, as a Draconic Sorcerer, Fear and Fly for free, both fantastic spells and very on point thematically. But in addition, yeah, you'd love to have Hypnotic Pattern and Slow for great control, Fireball and or Lightning Bolt for some nice multi-target burst damage to throw on top of your multi-target sustain damage, right? Counterspell, naturally. Go ahead and grab whatever is going to help out your team best and or be the most fun for you. Don't forget, we get 4th level spell slots now here too, thanks to multiclassing with Ranger. At level 11, we would be a Sorcerer 6, and as a Draconic Sorcerer, that means we get the very nice Elemental Affinity. This tells us that we pick an elemental damage type, and from this point on have resistance to that damage type, and also when we deal damage of that type with a spell specifically, we can add our charisma modifier to 1 damage roll of that spell. Now, this feature is actually the main reason why I said at the beginning that we wanted to make sure that we went something other than a fire-based dragon for our dragonborn draconic ancestry, right? Because I mean, our Dragonborn Breath Weapon isn't technically a spell, so all of the things that we've done to benefit a damage type, the Elemental Adept feat, and now this, benefits spell damage only. So in that case, yes, we are going to want fire, and we'll probably, as a result, want to use fire for our Dragon's Breath spell too, as long as the enemy isn't immune to it, right, or vulnerable to something else. But that Breath Weapon attack isn't a spell, doesn't benefit, and thus lets us pick up some diversity in our Draconic portfolio, and also benefit from 2 different damage resistances, yeah? We had cold or acid or poison, etc. from our species, and now we've got fire resistance too. Is it weird to be, say, like a silver dragonborn with an elemental affinity for fire? Maybe? But it's kind of cool too. I don't know. Maybe we're like a hybrid of gold and silver parentage. Maybe we represent 2 chromatic aspects of our patron Tiamat. Have fun with it. Don't forget, at level 11 here, Draconic Breath Weapon and Green Flame Blade get a D10 and a D8 bump, respectively. At level 12, we would be a Sorcerer 7, and that means we get Sorcery Incarnate, which gives us more uses of innate sorcery if we're willing to spend sorcery points to do so, right, because we're out of uses. And also says that while innate sorcery is active, we can use 2 metamagic options on a spell we cast. And yeah, that is pretty nice, but we're not really using innate sorcery much, right? And I mean, I guess I should say here, there's definitely an argument for like taking Green Flame Blade as both a sorcerer and a warlock spell, and then when you're up against really hard to hit enemies, using innate sorcery and then casting Green Flame Blade as a sorcerer spell, thus getting advantage on all of your Green Flame Blade attacks, right? Rather than getting bonus damage from Agonizing Blast if we were to cast it as a warlock spell, right? It's a bummer that we can't just do both. Maybe your DM will allow it. The math for this build was just so complicated. What with trying to figure out at what point the breath weapon is a better use of our action, and how often our cleave and horde breaker attacks would actually trigger, and then what the likelihood would be of those hitting if they did get triggered, etc., that I just didn't want to complicate it even further. But know that yes, you could technically take Green Flame Blade as both a warlock spell and a sorcerer spell, and then decide which version of it you were going to cast based on, you know, the armor class of the enemies you were fighting, right? Anyways, we also get 4th level sorcerer spells here, and draconic sorcerers get Arcane Eye and Charm Monster for free, which are situationally really nice. But beyond that, I'm just going to say pick your favorites. There are a ton of great options: Dimension Door, Polymorph, Wall of Fire, etc., but none that I will necessarily assume we're using in combat. We do also now get 5th level spell slots at this level thanks to multiclassing. At level 13, we would be a Sorcerer 8, giving us another feat so that we can finally bump our Charisma and cap it at 20. Yay. I mean, sure, feel free to take another Charisma half feat. Maybe you want Warcaster now if you didn't get it before, which maybe you should have done, and then like Dragon Fear later to get to that, you know, Charisma 20, but I have an eye on the damage report, which is happening right now. So, since last check, we've capped our Charisma, picked up a 5th level spell slot in case we wanted to waste it on something as lowly as Dragon's Breath, got a bump to Green Flame Blade and our Breath Weapon if we use it, and picked up an extra 5 damage per hit with Green Flame Blade thanks to Elemental Affinity. Note that because of the way the Elemental Affinity is worded, we should only be able to add that 5 damage, right, to Dragon's Breath on a single damage roll, probably the first one, not every single round, which would be awesome, right? But hey, it's a little bump and I'll take it, but then, you know, the real benefit there is getting that extra 5 damage every time we cast Green Flame Blade. On top of all of that, we've added some nice control, utility, and AoE damage options, but at this point, averaged over a 4-round combat encounter against enemies with a 10 armor class. We would do 138 damage per round, and against a 17 AC, it would be 119 DPR. So we have blown past the century mark. That's fantastic, putting us kind of in the same place as last time compared to other multi-target damage dealers to date at this level, right? Smack dab in the middle. Again, doing more damage per target, though, than either of them, which feels great. For the record, You would want to use your breath weapon on rounds 2 through 4 now at an armor class of 21 and up. All right, let's see how we land this worm. At level 14, we have a decision to make. I see this build going one of two ways from here. On one hand, we could just stay sorcerer, scaling our spell slots for more damage from Dragon's Breath, plus getting more sorcery points, plus getting more meta magic options, plus, best of all, of course, 5th and 6th level sorcerer spells is incredibly compelling, and if you wanted to go that route, you should. I think at this point, yeah, this late in the game, I'd go back to Warlock, meaning we would be a Warlock 3, and I'll explain why as we go. First off, as a Warlock 3, we get our subclass, and we would want to go Celestial. And I mean, sure, if Bahamut is your patron, you could totally be a Celestial Warlock. It makes 100% sense. Celestial Warlocks get Healing Light, which gives them a number of d6s equal to their Warlock level that they can use as a bonus action to heal someone within 60 feet. We get those dice back on a long rest, so it's just a nice little, in case of emergency, heal option. And then we get 2nd level Warlock spells now, and Celestial Warlocks get like 5 billion spells for free. Aid, Cure Wounds, Guiding Bolt, Lesser Restoration, Light, and Sacred Flame, all for free. That's amazing. And is a nice addition to our support and utility, mostly, right? Beyond that, for 2nd level Warlock spells, just PYF, pick your favorites. At level 15, we would be a Warlock 4, and that means we get another feat, and I would probably bump my Constitution, I think, and take it to 16. It's better for our health, it's better for our saving throws, and even the DC of our Draconic Breath weapon, right? Alternatively, consider bumping Dex for better dexterity saves, a better initiative, and even potentially a better armor class, at least compared to mundane half-plate, thanks to our Draconic Resilience feature, right? But I mean, you probably have magic armor by now, or you might have taken the defense fighting style, which requires armor. So yeah, bump Constitution, or sure, Resilient Wisdom or something else if you want. But if you haven't taken Warcaster yet, I wouldn't take it here, because at level 16, we would be a Warlock 5, and that means we get 2 more Eldritch Invocations. One of the main reasons that I like going back to Warlock on this build. First up, I would grab Eldritch Smite. This lets us spend a Warlock spell slot specifically, and kinda unfortunately for us, since we only have 2 of them, right, to add what would be 4d8 of force damage to our target when we hit them with our packed weapon, and when we do this, it lets us automatically knock them prone, no save, if they're huge, yes, huge or smaller. That's kind of amazing. I'm going to assume that we are using both of our Warlock spell slots to do this over a 4-round combat encounter, which will basically add 2d8 of damage on average, right? As for the 2nd invocation, do we go Thirsting Blade? Surely we should have done this a long time ago. Honestly, no. I know. How crazy is it that we get so much damage out of Green Flame Blade that we would consider passing on extra attack if it were available? I mean, yeah, we could with Thirsting Blade make 1 weapon attack and then still use our Dragonborn Breath weapon. But even doing that means less total damage than a single Green Flame Blade attack, assuming 2 targets standing next to each other, until we get up to a 25 enemy armor class. And if we have a magic weapon that increases our hit chance, not even then. So yeah, we don't need no stinking extra attack. And that means we can get Eldritch Mind, finally, instead, and enjoy advantage on concentration checks. We don't need no stinking Warcaster either. Oh, maybe we should have got to Warlock 5 sooner. I'll talk about that in the final thoughts. Maybe after Sorcerer 6. We get a lot out of Elemental Affinity on this build. But anyways, we then also get 3rd level Warlock spells, and I mean, Celestial Warlocks get Daylight and Revivify for free. Very nice. Other than that, though, pick your favorites, PYF. But then finally for us, at level 17, we get the other really nice thing about going Celestial Warlock for this build, because we would be a Warlock 6, and that means we get Radiant Soul, which says that we have resistance to radiant damage. Awesome. That's 3 resistances now. And also that once per turn, not round. That's important. When we cast a spell that does radiant or fire damage, we can add our charisma modifier to that spell's damage against one of the spell's targets. So yes, that means we can get 5 more damage out of Green Flame Blade once per turn at least, and it should mean that yes, we can also get 5 more damage out of a fire-based Dragon's Breath. It doesn't say on one roll of the spell like the Draconic Sorcerer's Elemental Affinity, but once per turn. And since our familiar has their own initiative and goes on their own turn, we should be able to get an extra 5 out of Dragon's Breath, now 2, to one of the targets that gets hit by it at least. I'll note, the wording here, I can see it being potentially problematic. It specifically says that once per turn, when a spell you cast deals radiant or fire damage, you can add damage, right? I can see some people interpreting this as the extra damage only applies on the turn that you cast the spell, but I think it's just as easy, if not even easier maybe, to interpret this as working every round. Otherwise, I think it would be worded more like Elemental Affinity was for Draconic Sorcerers, which says, quote, when you cast a spell that deals damage of that type, you can add your Charisma modifier to 1 damage roll of that spell, right? So that's the way that I'm going to lean here. If it doesn't work that way at your table, that's fine. It's not going to be a huge impact to the numbers, but yes, I am totally playing my Treant Monk agrees with me card here. Watch his video on Searing Smite up here, assuming that I have cards left. I don't think I do. You can just search for Treant Monk Searing Smite and you should find it. I actually keep meaning to build around Searing Smite a little more intentionally myself sometime. That's still on the to-do list. Anyways, finally, at this level, don't forget our Draconic Breath Weapon and Green Flame Blade get their final D10 and D8 bumps. This then brings us to our final damage report. Since last check, we have added a d8 to each target every time we use Green Flame Blade. We've added 5 more damage to Green Flame Blade and to Dragon's Breath to 1 target only, but once every round, thanks to Radiant Soul. We've thumbed our nose at extra attack and just picked up Eldritch Smite, which I think thanks to it auto-proning an enemy, which gives us advantage, right, being in melee, and thanks to the fact that we have 6 luck points available to us now at this level, I'm just going to assume that we've got advantage on all of our Green Flame Blade attacks now, finally, of which we're making 2 per turn, right? Whether because we've knocked them prone or because we're using another luck point, and that's nice. And on top of all of that, we've gained a slew of support, utility, and defensive options to boot. So, against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would on average here do 176 damage per round, and against an enemy with an 18 AC, it would be 166 DPR. Averaged over a 4-round combat encounter, spread between 2 targets who are conveniently standing next to each other. But compared to other multi-target builds I've done to date at this level, we are, same place as before, right in the middle, and it's just a beautiful dragon sandwich. So, let's talk about things in the final thoughts here. So the tier score for this build, if you take the damage that they do against every armor class that we calculate for at each of the 4 damage reports, average it into one big number, you end up with a 99, good old Wayne Gretzky, as expected, right between the other 2 multi-target builds. But as I've been saying, averaging a lot more damage per target than either of them, which is really great. So yeah, I do have a lot of thoughts here. First up, as with the other Cleaver build, sure, you're not always going to have 2 enemies standing next to each other, and in that case, you're going to see a big hit to these numbers. And I am 100% totally okay with that. You are a specialist. You have a thing that you do, and when you can do it, you're freaking amazing at it. And when you can't, you're still putting out some pretty solid damage, plus bringing some utility support, even control potentially. So it's not like the build is just worthless when the enemies aren't playing nice for you, right? Especially considering the Dragon's Breath and Draconic Breath weapon options we've got, which don't care quite so much if the enemies are all packed together nicely, right? And even have the potential to affect more than 2 targets. You are a multi-target specialist, and it is what you do best. That said, looking back on this build, I do kind of wish that I would have had the time to tweak it just a smidge. At level 9, we are, I think, best off the way that we went. But at level 13, we would have been stronger with just 6 levels of Sorcerer, 6 levels of Warlock, and then just 1 level of Ranger. I was just really enamored by getting Hordebreaker, and while 1 more cleaving attack is really fun and cool, I don't think I quite realized how much damage we were going to be getting out of Green Flame Blade compared to other attacks, especially if we build for it with Agonizing Blast, Elemental Affinity, and Radiant Soul. I mean, you guys, at the end there, on the first Green Flame Blade attack that we landed per round at least, a single Green Flame Blade is doing 1d12 plus 6d8 plus 30 total damage on a single hit. That's freaking amazing. So now I've got my, one-hit wonder 2.0 idea. And I'm pretty sure I know what I would do to make that one hit even more powerful. That's going to have to stay on the to-do list for a while because it's a little too similar to this build. But by the time I had realized all of this, I was already like 12 hours into creating this build, having reworked it and crunched the numbers over and over and over a million different ways. And I just couldn't stand the idea of going back yet again to redo it in a way that would favor the level 13 damage report, and 17 for that matter. And besides, most campaigns end at around level 10 anyways, right? So for most campaigns, the way we went is probably best. But yeah, if I were going to start this at like level 13 or so, maybe for a one-shot, right, or a high-level campaign, I'd probably go Sorcerer 6, Warlock 6, Ranger 1, and then probably Sorcerer the rest of the way, though you could make an argument for Warlock instead. Anyways, where we ended up was so freaking fantastic regardless. I am so in love with this character. They are the quintessential Dragony Gish. Flying, cleaving, breathing acid or cold or lightning while their pet baby dragon rains down fire from above, frightening their enemies and making their patron, whether Bahamut or Tiamat, so very, very proud. So I hope you enjoyed watching as much as I enjoyed making it, and I hope you enjoyed Dragon Week. Again, please be sure to check out all the other dragon-themed videos that my fellow creators are putting together this week. It's so much fun. And a huge thanks to Ginny and Antonio for putting this together again. You guys are awesome. Who am I kidding? They're not watching this video. This is way too long. Anyways, I hope you guys know that I love you. Thank you so much for all that you do for me and for this channel. You are the best. I hope you have a great day and a fantastic week. And if you don't, I hope that you will not give up. Please hang in there. You can do it. I hope that you will do good and be kind, and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. Trogdor was a man. I mean, he was a dragon man. Or maybe he was just a dragon, but he was still Trogdor. Trogdor. Burninating the countryside. Burninating the peasants. Burninating all the people and the thatch-roofed cottages. Thatch-roofed cottages. Oh, for all of you young whippersnappers who are not familiar with Homestar Runner and Strong Bad, you're missing out. I'm telling you, you got to look them up. I bet they're probably on YouTube somewhere, all of those old Homestar Runner videos. I used to teach at the University of Utah for the English department. And I, while class was starting, I would have like Homestar Runner videos going. Yeah, those were good days. Good stuff. And I mean, you gotta sing the Trogdor song for Dragon Week when you're wearing the Trogdor t-shirt. Right. So, in case you missed, I already said right, so I need to come up with some new intros. When you do, I would appreciate it if you would use the link that I'm putting in the video description. Say that over, I kind of flubbed it. Or to give an enemy disadvantage on an attack roll against us. Always handy. I don't know if it has to be against us, so just say or they obey. And for those who don't know, or if we can't get 3 or more in the AO, or if we can get, I know how crazy.